right, so I made a video where I was discussing an article that was warning players about Baldur's Gate 3, basically saying that the game was not ready for release and that it was rushed to a release. And in the comment section, I noticed that there was a lot of people that were actually agreeing with the article in a lot of different regards. And in that video, I also discussed how there's a lot of polish that's still required in this game, especially in Act 3. But one of the other things that popped up were people that were talking about removed content from the game, pointing directly to data mined material that they've seen on Reddit. Now, I want to approach this topic in the least spoiler way that I possibly can, because I feel like this is something that's a valuable discussion for everybody, whether they played the game or they haven't, whether they finished the game or they're still in Act 1. Moreover, I want to discuss all of the things that were removed from the game, how many things are removed, and why they may have been removed to begin with. Look, I'm not a zealot. I'll judge a game when it's worthy of being judged. And in some areas, there is judgment that does need to be cast at Baldur's Gate 3 and Larian Studios for some mistakes that have been made. However, I'm somebody that genuinely just tries to look at things from an optimistic point of view. I don't like being pessimistic. I just don't feel like it's healthy. And I realize that this is the natural way us gamers usually react to these kind of things, but I just don't want to. So if that's what you're here for, you're not going to get it. I'm sorry. Now, the tricky part about covering this topic is that anything that I bring up could potentially be seen as spoilers. So I'm going to be rather vague when describing some of the pieces that were removed from the game. All of the content in this discussion is in response to a Reddit thread that was posted a few days ago titled Compendium of Cut Content from Final Version of Game. This list compiles a lot of assumed lost features that were discovered through data miners doing their thing. The content seemingly removed from the game includes various plot lines, quests, and character interactions that would result in different endings for Baldur's Gate 3. Things that could rework tadpole powers, various ways to remove the tadpole, playable characters removed from Act 1, Cult of Baal content, a minor boss and story in Act 2, larger narrative influence for characters like Raphael, more items, more equipment, and most of all, the removal of both Avernus and the upper city of Baldur's Gate. Players in both my comment section and on Reddit have voiced their dissatisfaction with many of the different endings that they have experienced and the scarcity of party feedback in the later third of the game. Now, that is a lot of content that was removed from Baldur's Gate. I'll be honest with you. That's a long list. There's a lot of different things in there, and no gamer wants to hear about any content that's been cut from a game, especially with how we've been treated over the last few years, because then we're just waiting for them to sell it to us later. But that's not the case with Baldur's Gate 3, and we already know that to begin with. I think it's one thing for us to see cut content from the game and then also look at it and say, well, because there's a lack of polish at the end of the game, that they must have rushed it, that the game still needed time. And while that actually might be true, it's also just speculation on our part. And even my position is still going to be speculation. What I'm going to try to provide is a different perspective. Because if we say that because we found cut content from the game that this game wasn't finished, well, then we'd be saying the same thing for just about every game that we've ever played. Removing content isn't something new for developers or gamers. We've seen it countless times across various genres. Players have had many issues with the endings of games like Mass Effect 3 not providing nearly enough closure, and later released an extended cut DLC that included content that was initially removed from the release of the game. Destiny advertised content that never showed up in the first release and later sold it as DLC. Hell, Destiny is still one of the most egregious in withholding content just to piecemeal it later to their audience. Fallout New Vegas, another game that people absolutely love, also had an entire storyline, companions, and areas removed from the game before its launch. I think the most recent example of cut content that I can think of is Overwatch 2. A game where Blizzard promoted the game having this story mode, this co-op, this progression that players are going to be able to go through, only to cut that content, make an apology video, and then now they're talking about piecemealing story pieces as paid DLC that players are going to have to play at some point. It's ridiculous. As players, we are already jaded into thinking this content is going to be sold back to us, so anytime we see a game that has cut content, we immediately get upset about it. And I understand that from our perspective as the consumer, we don't care about why they cut content. We've seen it in the past where they're doing it for nefarious reasons, but there's also tons of reasons why completely fine games do get released, great games get released, but still have cut content as well. Most games have cut content. Creative projects are usually a bit more fluid and flexible as they progress on. Sometimes you imagine something that you want to achieve, however, for various reasons, you're just not able to get there. Game development is an iterative process where developers experiment with various concepts, mechanics, and ideas. Some of these concepts may be tested and implemented temporarily, but then later discarded because there's better alternatives that they find. Data mine files can often reflect these experiments, these early experiments that they have in the game, but they may never actually have been intended to be a part of the final product. Some data mine content could be remnants of early prototypes or ideas that were never fully realized or integrated into the main game. These prototypes may have been abandoned and they're just left in the game files. We've seen it time and time again. Now, there are a ton of reasons why content might be cut from a game and why a game may be released without that fine sheen of polish that it needs to run perfectly across every platform and every system and every combination of parts in a PC. And when I look at Larian Studios, and this is speculation, I'm going to say it's probably due to budgetary constraints. Now, I realize that the game sold great in early access. They sold over 2 million copies in early access. And yes, Divinity Original Sin 2 and the Definitive Edition did sell relatively well for the genre that they're in. But at one point in time, the game has to come out. And this isn't the first time that Larian would have ran up against the red line of their budget before a game's release. And there's also a few factors here that weren't punched in when they were likely making their projections on how well this game would do. As the consumer, we only care about the final product, not the process to make it, nor the amount of effort that it takes to make a game in the first place. And we're well within our right to be that way because we're the ones that are staking our money for the product in the first place. We are the ones that are buying it. We expect to enjoy it, we expect it to be good, and we expect it to be polished. We can say things like they should have pushed the release back to include more content and polish, but what if it actually wasn't realistic for Larian to do so? Now, I'm not saying that it isn't Larian's fault for this, because they absolutely are at fault for it if that is the case. It's poor planning on their fault, and that would have led to cutting content or the game lacking polish. Now, I don't know Larian's financials. However, if we look at some key factors, we can start to see a much clearer picture. One of the things that we do know about the release of Baldur's Gate 3 is that it's been delayed on the Xbox Series S. This has been a major issue for them for the last year as they've been trying to get the game working on split screen on the Series S, which we also all know is a much more underpowered machine than the PlayStation 5, the Series X, and obviously the PC. Now, the thing is that Xbox has a clause in which they have a parity. They won't allow games to release only on the Series X. It has to come out for both. That's a promise that they have made to their players, that no matter what console they bought, they would be able to play any game that was released, which means that they can't release the game on Xbox until that Series S version is finished. That's money that's left on the table, but that's also a lot of resources that's being taken up on something that they were not expecting to have to work with. And this is such a problem for them that Microsoft themselves have sent engineers to help them get split screen working on the Series S to make sure that they can follow along with the parity between the Series X and the Series S. Now, this isn't to say that Xbox may or may not have been able to slide them some extra resources or some extra money, but this is something that's well outside of what they probably expected they were going to have to deal with, nor did they expect it was something that was going to take them into 2024. In combination with the Xbox issue, there is also an interview with Sven Vinke, the producer of Baldur's Gate 3 and the CEO of Larian Studios, where Vinke said that they had only imagined that there would be 100,000 concurrent players on release. 875,000 is a rather drastic difference in what they initially projected. And these are just concurrent players. These aren't actually sales figures. If what Sven said was true, that means that this game would have performed over 8 times better than what they expected on Steam. And that's not even counting the sales on GOG. The underestimation of sales and the unforeseen issues with the Xbox may have led to content being cut and the game not receiving that last bit of polish, because they didn't see it as being possible. Now, I've discussed this in the past in previous videos, but Larian Studios has danced with bankruptcy in the past. During the development of Divinity Original Sin, they ran out of funding to the point that they couldn't even pay some of the developers that they had working for them at the time. I think it's well within the realm of possibility that they ran to the end of their rope yet again. And the situation with the Xbox delay only served as oil on the rope. Now, I'm not saying that it's not their fault that they didn't plan properly, that the game didn't get enough polish, that they didn't look for unforeseen issues that could come up just before the release of the game. But what I am saying is, I just try to look at things from every perspective possible. There's a lot more going on than we normally give a lot of developers credit for, and the reason we don't give them credit for it is because we're used to being taken advantage of by every developer that's out there. So I just want you to take a minute to put yourself in the seat of an independent developer that's self-funded, that has a good game, that knows that it's done. Yeah, there's some things that you couldn't add to the end of it. Yeah, there's a little bit of extra polish they could use, but you know it's done. And there's players that are waiting for it and players that want to play it, and you have to release it because you have to keep the company running. I made a video that was called The Rise of Baldur's Gate 3. And in that video, I discuss how this is a creatively led company. Sven Vinke, the CEO of Larian Studios, the producer of all of their great RPGs, is a developer himself. And this is something that us gamers have always wanted from a lot of the AAA productions that we normally see throughout the industry, because those people hold the same values for the things that we actually want to see in games. But I think at the same time, that also might come with a price. That some of these developers might not either A, have the resources, or B, have the ability to make the right financial planning to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as it possibly can. And now, this is just my opinion and my perspective. You are welcome to sit where you are and say, no, YouTube man, I want complete games. I want them to be perfect on release, and I want what I get for what I pay for. And you are well within your right to ask for that. But I'm the dude with the microphone and the camera, so I just say how I feel and how I think. That's it. So let's discuss what this means for the future of Baldur's Gate 3. In many of my previous videos, I've talked about Divinity Original Sin 2. And a lot of the continuity issues that are experienced in Baldur's Gate 3 mirror those that people experienced in the launch of Divinity Original Sin 2. DOS 2's final act was missing content and had a lot of performance issues. As the months followed the release of Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian added more content to the game for free, reworked quests, fixed dialogue, made balance changes, and much, much more, which all culminated in a final release called the Definitive Edition of Divinity Original Sin 2, a free download to those who had already purchased the game. I think this is likely what's going to happen with Baldur's Gate 3. Furthermore, Larian has also released all of the developer tools for fans of the game to be able to mod the game, meaning that modders are going to have access to all of that data mined content from Baldur's Gate 3. Divinity Original Sin 2 had an incredibly active modding community. However, Baldur's Gate 3 is far more popular than Divinity Original Sin 2 and will likely attract even more modding talent. It won't be before long that we'll see extra quests, stories, items, abilities, character levels, and explorable areas in Baldur's Gate 3. Now I'm going to say it again, because I know I'm going to see it in the comment section anyway. It is not our responsibility to finish that which wasn't finished. It is not our responsibility to take the position and try to be understanding for the developers that are making games. And I realize more times than not, we are the ones actually being taken advantage of. However, this is my YouTube channel where I get to give you my honest opinion. Not for you, but for me, because it's what I enjoy to do. I brought it up in previous videos. I just like making videos. I like talking about video games. I have a full-time job. This is my hobby, and this is a hobby that I love. I genuinely do. So if you want or you're looking for more people to be outraged with you, I'm sorry, you're not getting it here. Because I love Baldur's Gate 3. I'm having an absolute blast playing the game. I'm happy they released it, and I can't wait to play more of it. And I know the game's going to get better over time. And this isn't one of those copium situations where I'm playing Overwatch or World of Warcraft. Why is it always Blizzard games? You guys just need to get it together. It's almost like I should make a video about things that Blizzard could learn from Larian. Anyway, that's all I got, man. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, subscribe to the channel. If not, see you later. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitch. Link down below. Also, there's a Discord link that'll be in the comments. I suggest joining it because I like chatting with everybody. It makes my days at work go by faster. Plus, on top of that, if you guys ever see some articles or topics that you guys want me to cover, you can drop them in the Discord, and I'll likely look over it. Outside of that, my friends, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, and most of all, I'll see you in Baldur's Gate. Peace!